Creation Science Evangelism presents Creation in Common Sense with Eric Hovind.
Welcome to Creation in Common Sense. I'm your host, Eric Hovind. Joining me again is Cy Ten Bruggencate from Canada, author and editor of ProofThatGodExists.org. Thanks for being with us again, Cy.
Glad to be here.
Now, last time we looked at 1 Peter 3:15. It demands that we give an answer to everybody that asks us a question.
That's
we have
right.
to defend our faith.
That's a lot of work. Greg Bahnsen, he gave this analogy. He said, can you imagine that you were going to be put into a room with a man with a gun who had an unlimited supply of bullets, and you wanted to survive in that room? Now, you could learn gymnastics, how to dodge and weave away from every bullet in order to survive, or you could learn to take away the gun. What do you think would be better?
I think I'd much rather take away the gun. That sounds a whole lot smarter to me.
Okay, one of the ways that we take away the gun is we look at the fundamental assumptions of the unbeliever. One of them is logic.
Okay, so what is logic?
Logic talks about the principles of reasoning, and it has some fundamental elements. For instance, logic is not made of matter, logic is universal, and logic does not change. Those elements comport with the Christian worldview and nowhere else.
Explain that. How does that help you take away a gun? If I came to you with a contradiction in the Bible, hey, there's a contradiction in the Bible, how does logic help you take away the gun here?
Okay, now what you could do is you could learn the Greek and the Hebrew, you could learn the gymnastics, how to dodge bullets, but not only is that a lot of work, it puts us as the authority over Scripture, rather than having Scripture as the authority over us.
Because we're judging it.
Right. So when somebody says to me, what about all the logical contradictions in the Bible, I don't go and I examine the minutiae. I mean, there's great websites that do that, like yours, for instance.
We do that.
What I ask them, for instance, is I say, why are logical contradictions not allowed? I can tell them why they're not allowed according to my worldview, because logical contradictions amount to lying, and God tells us not to lie.
But an atheist doesn't have that to stand on.
That's right. They say that logical contradictions are not allowed because they violate the laws of logic. And I ask them, well, look at the laws of logic. They're universal, they're not made of matter, and they do not change. Interestingly enough, the God of Scripture is universal, he's not made of matter, and he does not change. Now, according to the atheistic worldview, we live in a world that's only made of matter and is constantly changing. How do you get universal laws which forbid contradictions in a worldview like that?
Wow.
It just doesn't happen.
So when an atheist comes to the Bible and says, you can't prove the Bible because of this contradiction, they're using logic. However, logic can only be accounted for from the Bible.
That's right.
They can't account for it. I love it because when they come to me and say, I want evidence of such and such, well, I got to be able to point out, instead of saying, okay, let me find the evidence, say, well, hold on, evidence assumes logic.
That's correct.
And logic is only consistent with the God of the Bible.
That's right.
Or, hey, give me proof of, hold it, proof assumes logic. And logic is only consistent with the God of the Bible. Now, you're writing a book on this, right?
That's right.
Now, I can't wait for that to be done. Until then, I have read a great substitute that we'll have to do. Till then, Dr. Jason Lisle has actually done an incredible job. He's from Answers in Genesis. He wrote a book entitled The Ultimate Proof, where he explains how to use this line of reasoning, this apologetic, to defend the faith. How do you take their gun away? On page number 40, he gives the ultimate proof. I'm giving away the whole book right here. All right, right in the middle of the page. The ultimate proof of creation is this. If biblical creation were not true, we could not know anything. Now, if you don't get that, then you need to get this, because it helps explain that. It does go a little deep, but man, let me tell you, once you understand this, once you comprehend it, you will be able to give an answer to everyone. And that's exactly what we're supposed to be doing.
Exactly.
Well, we got more to talk about. We still need to talk about science and morality and things like that. But that's it for this episode. Thanks for joining us for Creation and Common Sense. We want to continue to use creation and science for evangelism. I hope you'll do that too. Now, if you want to stick around, Cy and I are going to chew the cud on this one because it gets deep. Dude, this gets really deep. All right, now, here's some objections that I've heard that I'm kind of curious about. What about when people say the laws of logic are man-made? How do you answer that?
I hear that all the time because people don't want to admit that logic comes from God. So they have to say, well, man-made logic. What I ask them is I say, if man-made logic, could the universe have both existed and not existed at the same time and in the same way before man showed up?
Because it would be dependent on what man decides.
That's right. If man showed up and changed the nature of the universe, that would be absurd. And if they say, no, man didn't change the nature of the universe, then they can't even know if they exist, and that's absurd too.
Dude, that's deep.
Man,
so what you're saying is, okay, so when somebody says, hey, man created logic, that means man could continue to create logic.
That's right. If they say that, man created logic at some point, I could get a whole bunch of Christians together and say that everything that the unbeliever says is illogical. If we get enough people to agree on it, then the majority say, atheism or unbelief is illogical. They wouldn't accept that. They would say, well, wait a minute. Man doesn't make logic. Logic must come from somewhere else.
Now, atheists are definitely going to think that we're closed-minded. I mean, when you go to them and say, no, I'm not giving up the authority of Scripture, like we talked about in the last Creation and Common Sense, if you stick with this, they're saying, oh, you're just closed-minded.
And, and that's the problem, because a lot of Christians, they run away from an accusation like that. I embrace it. I'm closed-minded because I have the right answer. If somebody says to me, what's 2 + 2? I'm closed-minded on the fact that it's 4. I'm not going to say, well, it might be 5, it might be 6. It's 4, and I'm closed-minded on that.
Wow. What are the kind of objections to this line of reasoning? I mean, what do the atheists say when you use this argument and show them they really do believe in God because they use logic, and logic can only be accounted for in the Christian worldview? What's their response to this?
Well, I have to tell you, they don't like it. And you have to be really careful, because it's a powerful apologetic. You have to use it with gentleness and respect. Because if you go into their worldview and start trashing the furniture in a loving way, mind you, they're going to be upset with you. You do it lovingly, but you're not defending your faith anymore. We know what we believe. We're attacking their worldview in a loving way, but it's devastating to them.
It's bringing the bulldozer to the foundation.
Just watch the reaction to these videos. They're not going to like it.
I find that fascinating, because everything you believe hinges on the way you act hinges on your worldview. So when you take away the idea that, look, you can't be an atheist, you are a believer. You're just suppressing that. When you take that away from them, whoa. Man, I'm praying for you guys. Your worldview is in shambles. It doesn't make sense. That's kind of harsh. So just a little warning to you Christians out there, like Si was saying, feel free to use this apologetic. And man, I'm telling you, there's some great stuff in the book. Find it online. But be careful. It is a sharp, powerful weapon, and needs to be used in love. Well, thanks for chatting with me, man. All right, hey, let's come back and talk about science. How does science do the same thing? It's going to be good stuff. All right, God bless, guys.